Welcome to the Voices from the House of Zophiel. Today, we are talking with Caroline Wise. Caroline has contributed to several books on goddesses, on Florence Farr of the Hermetic Order and of the Golden Dawn, and the artist Austin Osman Spare. She has compiled the book Finding Elen on forgotten goddesses associated with deer. Caroline also gives talks on these subjects in the United Kingdom, the USA, Germany, and Italy. Caroline has also co-edited The Secret Law of London, and she leads walking tours on Mythic London and on the British Museum and the awakening of British magic. Today, Caroline is going to talk about her relationship with the goddess, and in particular, the goddess in the 21st century. So, hello, Caroline, and thank you for being our guest on the Voices of the House of Zophiel.
Thank you for having us.
That's lovely. I'm so excited, actually. I think what's really important for our listeners is that people are not aware as much as they could be about how important the goddess is. They're not aware of why this is part of our human heritage and tradition. And they don't often meet somebody who's invested a lot of their lifetime connecting with certain energies about this and investing who they are and their spiritual nature in terms of why the goddess is important to us. So my first question to you is, when did this interest begin for you?
From my earliest memories, from early childhood onwards. So I suppose most conscious from the age of 5. My older sister, who had started school before me, was talking about the magical fiction that they were doing at school, like Narnia, for instance. And I think I was captivated from the very beginning with this mysterious pull of the mythical and magical. And it was a pull to something which obviously at that age I couldn't articulate. But the magic also was happening for me in nature's mysticism, as we understand it now. I mean, I was a little kid. Nature in the garden. I was fascinated by the animals there. Deep magic with the frogs and toads and newts, especially. Hedgehogs, insects, birds, butterflies. And there was a sense of them going about in their world, which was different to ours, but obviously in the same space. So what I would now be able to articulate as their instinctive primal life was something I felt a kinship to or a connection to. So I was an instinctual animist from earliest memory.
Yeah.
So I'm not just seeing the fauna, but the pond and the trees and the flowers and the hedges as also being alive, and having a spirit and a soul and some level of agency, that they were kind of capable of deep thought, however mad that might sound. That was a magical realm to me. So I didn't understand it intellectually, obviously, but inside it's like a deep stirring and sometimes awe. And as I said, we now know that as nature mysticism. So from the beginning, it's animistic, and I felt the currents very strong, and I also felt the pain of things sometimes. But flowers, for instance, could just fascinate me with their beauty and everything about them.
Right.
But I had some interesting experiences that were a little bit beyond that, which were like a powerful magical punch. Which my father was a pianist, and he was a scholar from what was then called the Royal School of Church Music. And he used to practice on the piano every day. And so you'd hear the same tunes or bits of tunes over and over as he was trying to get them right. And he used to play over and over. What I learned was Sheep May Safely Graze by Bach. And one day, in the magical hawthorn tree, which was just not too far from the doors into the garden, I heard a thrush singing it.
Wow.
And every day this thrush would sing a few bars of this tune. So it was this magical thing happening. So my connection began, I would say, with nature mysticism and magical fiction. I had a strange experience again as a child at school when the teacher was reading us Puck of Pook's Hill. And when Puck appears to the children, he's sitting on the log. I kind of jumped out of my body in the classroom, and I was there. I was there with Puck and the children, and it was a very real experience. And the other thing that we had at school, I think I was very lucky with this. I mean, the rest of it was horrible, but we had this sort of the classrooms had a big speaker up in the ceiling, and there was this whole course on the radio. So this would have been in the 1960s, based on mythology. Now, these were Greek myths and sagas, and also the Arthurian legends. And so the teacher didn't have to teach anymore. They just put this BBC program on, and we'd sit and listen to it, and you'd shut your eyes. And so it's like my first introduction to guided meditation and visualization, I think, unofficially. And so I learned also from childhood to be able to step into mythology, to actually step into it and be there, with Odysseus or whoever, as it was happening, which I suppose was quite good magical training for later life.
Yes. I really like some of the things you said, Caroline. Certainly something that resonates in my mind is this idea of other worlds in the same space. And I think that is something that I think a lot of people can move towards, that idea. For people that have been involved and part of that beauty for a long time, it becomes a norm, it becomes a natural thing. And for other people that are cluttered with other things, that they find it difficult to enter different realms, connect with other living things, I think that phrase, different worlds in the same space, really helps people move towards that idea. And I think that's beautiful. And also I like how you talk about this idea moving towards animistic things, animism, people, things, objects even having souls that move at different rates and times. So I think that when you talk also about stories and your childhood and how it began to happen, I think we can all appreciate that. And I think that's really helpful.
I won't say there isn't an element of escapism in it, because there was lots around childhood, home and school that were horrid.
Right.
So I think that's a useful way of applying it. But I mean, I wasn't consciously thinking it was escapism, and it certainly enriched my life a lot. My mother gave me an illustrated encyclopedia about animals. I think it was my 7th birthday. It wasn't a children's book, but it was a book for all ages with wonderful photographs in. And there were 2 prints, like as a free gift you got with it, high quality prints of prehistoric cave paintings. And those, again, lit some magic in me. I mean, I was a kid, I'd never seen anything like it before, but to me, it was just wonderful. And I felt a connection to it. And I had those on my bedroom wall for years until my parents and I sort of moved apart. And prehistoric art became something I've been linked to magically ever since. And certainly that is becoming more and more important part of my work with the goddesses. My interest in magic was there from as early as I can remember.
Mm.
And even things like this, I don't care how stupid this sounds because it was real. You know, we had the Moomin Troll books, and there was a deep magic there you could feel. And even through the Rupert Bear annuals we used to get every year for Christmas, um, there was wildwoods and forests and the magician and a wizard like goat and mysterious happenings in caves and the deep greenwood and that so as a lot of things stirred the magic in me. But coming back to the animism and inanimate objects, I to this day, and I don't know if you're the same, um, I'm always thanking them or apologizing to them if I bump into them. I've, apologized to a few postbox in my time.
Mm.
Um, because I have dyspraxia, which means there isn't much coordination with hand and brain. So I've learned that the inanimate objects are just as important, perhaps because I was always interacting with them in quite an odd way.
I love what you're saying there as well, Caroline. I mean, I think that once we become much more sensitive to nature and to other things, it's a different language. And I always say that the symbolic nature of the self and other things have a much deeper connection, a much different, better communication than words alone. Now, I'm sure poets and wordsmiths would hate me for saying that, but what I do know that acts of creative thought, as you say, thinking about things, moving towards spiritual connections, moving towards these things as a child, being engrossed and entertained by these things that are within the mind, they have another connectivity. And I think that there are other strands that connect us with things rather than just logical, rational thought, because it is not rational. It is the beauty of irrational nature. And I think that we've lost that somewhat, but can regain that. So I'm really pleased you mentioned that.
I absolutely agree, because when you're we tend to carve things up as humans, don't we? So we split everything. We don't like unity. So
No.
we have the sky world, the middle world, the underworld, the lower world. We have the conscious, the subconscious, the unconscious, and so on. But the actual force that some of us, I'm sure you're the same as an artist,
Mm.
there are currents that you can actually feel running beneath it all. That is all of it. It's different perceptions, perhaps at different levels, but it's not rational, and yet it's highly rational, if you know what I mean. It's rational that, of course, there is a spark in nature and
Mm.
a spark in life and a creative spark.
Mm.
So it's it's a different kind. It's not rational, but I suppose you can look at it as being a rational thing, that it's there.
I think so. It kind of reminds me of something that I was doing about a year or so ago when I was researching creativity, right? And one thing I came across is that it's very difficult for people to define what creativity is. I find magical systems creative, and I find all sources of creative systems come from that, let's call it that spark you mentioned. But it's interesting in history about you get condemned for that, really, because you're not like the rest of society and you don't follow the rules and you're not working in the same way. I mean, even, people were accused of being mad. The
Yeah.
creators were accused of being mad, and it goes all the way back even further from the Greeks. And then, this idea of it's just Kant, who was just incredibly, I would say, quite unusual person. But he talked about that idea of awe and wonder, where you are terrified and excited at the same time. Now, some people get that essence of those things because of who they are and the construct, and some people struggle to find it. So it's interesting how we come towards that. And for some of us, it's almost like breathing. And some other people, it's almost like the fairy tale. You search for it. You search for it. So
You've got the poets, of course, like Blake, where it's usual,
wow, yeah.
and then you've got Wordsworth and the Daffodils,
Mm,
where he wasn't expecting it. He hadn't dreamed of such a thing, and he's hit in the solar plexus or the mind or wherever, and lifted out of this, black spot. So yeah, you can be aware of it, or it can come along and knock you sideways in a very good way.
mm. And I think it's almost like medicine at times. And some of these things can be actually unpleasant as well. And yet somehow we need that to give us a kick in the pants to actually wake up to what is real and what we've been dreaming through, which is pretty much most of the time. So yeah, I think it's powerful stuff. I mean, I'm wondering, Caroline, if you could tell us a little bit about how that moved towards an interest in the goddess for you.
Yeah, just first of all, you've reminded me, if I may,
Hmm.
just quickly talk about an experience I had that was deeply, deeply unpleasant. But several years later, I was able to realize was an astonishing initiatory experience
Hmm.
with the goddess. And it was the night of the Great Storm of 1987 in southern England,
Yes.
where
Yes.
we had never in our lives, in our nobody in our generations alive had experienced a storm like that. But our ancestors, who we of course are connected to in an unbroken chain back to the beginning of humans emerging, they would have experienced these. So there must be, some instinct within us. The fear of the storm.
Hmm.
In those days, they would have lost their home and their animals and possibly even their lives. They would have lost their crops.
Hmm.
So we don't live like that here today, but that instinctive terror of the storm. And I normally love storms, but this was early hours of the morning in my flat in southeast London,
Hmm.
and I saw for the hills sort of in the distance this long picture window of the bedroom, the lights going down as each substation was shutting down because of the power of the storm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wow.
and through the window, through the glass, came, now I wasn't dreaming and I wasn't asleep. This was a vision in front of my eyes. It came this woman wolf, the she wolf, I called it.
Right.
And it came up onto my bed and it was coming towards me. And I could see the horrible bristly
Hmm.
things on its nose. It had the sort of serrated teeth. It was dripping with saliva. It wasn't very nice. And then it was coming for me. And I did an instinctive banishing, fit it back out the window, which it did go. And I just very quickly mention, whether it's significant here or not, that several other people, including people who were in my flat, who were known to be quite psychic,
Hmm.
and a few other people around the country had these images of these she-wolves that were coming to harm
Yeah.
them. And
Hmm.
I was told it was Hecate. And
Right.
but for I now absolutely adore Hecate
Hmm.
because she showed me, whether we give names to goddesses, whether this was Hecate or some primal form or some local form
Hmm.
of a primal goddess or a force that took the form of this animal. She showed me, and it took a long time for the penny to click. Nature, the power of nature. It's not always a walk in the park on a sunny day.
No.
That is not always a beautiful flower. Nature is the one that ripped up our ancestors' farmsteads, and
Yeah.
probably they all starved because all the crops and it were gone. There's nothing to feed the animals. So that those kind of experiences, I think, show you an awful lot more about the goddess and goddesses because they're primal forces of nature that normally we dress up to look quite nice in our minds and our art and so on. But of course, there's this primal thing always running underneath nature.
Yeah, and we try and control it, right? And
Yes, that's
actually,
what we do.
it's
It's the
like,
Neolithic.
why do we do this? Actually, I was in Essex at the time, and I do remember that feeling of the Black Hound. I think a lot of people picked up on it. It was incredible how many people could go, "Oh yeah, why is that?" Even if they don't know something else. And it's on. I go cold now. All my hairs have gone up because it was a very real time that is close to quite a lot of us, and I think it rattled our cage, if you coin a phrase. All right, because let's
Nature.
not be so
Right.
complacent. Let's not Disneyfy things. Let's not pretty things. I mean,
Yeah.
most Disney movies are horrific stories from Grimm. I'm like, why do we do that? You know, come on, it's good enough as it is, but we tend to do that because we lead frightened lives, I think, and we try and cover it up and we try and avoid the self in our relation. But I would say that, wouldn't I? I mean, you know, me, I'm quite a Jungian, and I would say, well, it's still us, and it's still us out there, the collective unconscious, and things seep in from places we don't understand. So, yeah, I think that's truly magical, if not incredibly forceful. So you're kind of moving there, Caroline. You're kind of moving towards this goddess feel. And I love the stuff you talked about being attracted to more ancient times of representation. And I think that we're starting to move towards that feeling that I know you have. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, my I wasn't directly aware of it, but my childhood interest in magic stayed with me, and I became, as a teenager, early 20s, very interested in the earth mysteries,
Mm.
um, and landscape mysteries and landscape geometry, and um, seeing it's like the landscape as a grimoire, seeing things in landscape, especially where people had decided to put what we see as sacred sites, stone monuments,
Yeah.
and so on. So that was my deep interest through the 70s and early 80s, but it was becoming more and more focused. The form that I could, my alphabet for it, my language for understanding the mysteries, became the goddesses. Goddesses in every culture,
Mm.
goddesses of everything, goddesses of every plant, every animal, every household task, everything's represented by a goddess somewhere. And then there's the great goddesses of war and love, and the overarching great mother figures. So the goddesses became my language, along with the landscape, for understanding the mysteries. I mean, some people might like the grimoires directly, some people might like the Golden Dawn or the neo-pagan spiritualities that have emerged, and that. But my way, and again, perhaps because I have dyspraxia, so it's difficult for me to learn from, say, a written course or something. This direct, instinctive relationship to the mysteries started to take form in, I suppose, what they call the feminine divine within the goddesses. And I found so many people, men and women, everybody, lots and lots of people also have this affinity with the goddesses. So some people may just be devoted to one particular goddess for whatever reasons. But I like them all, actually.
Right.
So I like to explore them all.
Right.
But I see them simply as, and I hope I'm not disrespecting them, but I have come to see them as our human embodiment. So we give them human shapes, except when they come as wolves. So the human embodiment of these more primal forces.
Right.
but for most people, primal force is a bit too abstract. So we need something that we can have an embodiment of it.
Yeah, a relationship in some effects, I suppose. So so we can cope with it, I expect. And I'm just wondering that you do run course on this and you have groups and you have talked about this for a long time. I mean, what do you think are people's takeaways from those experiences with other people?
Well, for a lot of people, it's a heart. It's something, it's something they carry in their heart. They simply love the goddesses.
Right.
For other people, they want goddesses that they can attune to. It's looking in a mirror in a way to these forces that are in us and around us and of us.
Yeah.
For a particular career or a particular sport. So if you're somebody who works with horses, you may want to, you may be very interested in honoring the goddess Epona. If you're a nurse or a midwife, you may want to become attuned to Brigid, the Irish, the Celtic goddess. And so for a lot of people, it's an individual thing. Hecate, I mentioned earlier, the Hecate followers, for want of a better word, today is enormous. As are those who follow the fierce lioness, solar goddess Sekhmet of Egypt, and of course the goddess Isis. So often it's a personal choice. So people want to get to know another goddess better. But I think it's the takeaway. Well, I think it's already there. I think people like to come together with groups of people who are doing this stuff on a deep level.
You've made me think about something then, which is I always find quite remarkable. And I forget about it. And then suddenly somebody says something. You just reminded me of when I was a long time ago when I was training in things like hypnotherapy and things like this. And actually, to be honest with you, hypnotherapy changed my world, working with the unconscious. I was like, hang on, this is real. And something, I can't remember who was said this to me, but he said to me, do you realize that most people looking for an answer have all the answers they need, but they just don't realize it? And having a connectivity to energy, goddess energy, the things you've described, even animals adopting the form of animals to emulate the passion and power behind it, and the sympathetic magic that is attached to that, does help you dig down. Because I think you're right, people have got that, they just don't know they've got it.
Well, I think every day, I wish I had the answer to things, but sometime attuning to the gods and goddesses in the way that other people might use tarot or other spiritualities, you can certainly draw on it for guidance, and sometimes the answers won't be obvious until we have a light bulb moment, because they might come to us in a symbolic way, and they might come to us in dreams and synchronicities, which we then figure out is actually showing us the answer to our problem. And I think this is what the oracle sites of the goddess were for, and the oracle priestesses in the ancient world. People would go and ask their question of these, what seemed to me to be quite chthonic energies, something below. The voice comes up, and or a priestess interprets what the oracle is saying for you. So part of what I do is to, and I do it with my friend Carrie, who, when we run our goddess days, is we allow, if women want to come forward during our ceremony that we always have to close, and be oracular, and that gives them enormous confidence once they've done it. And you have to get to that point where the voice of something is coming through your central nervous system, through your mouth, through your brain, it's filtering through you, but you also have to sit back into the goddess that's been evoked and see what she has to say. And as I say, when you start with this, some people, understandably, I mean, I was, the first time I was thrown into it by Olivia Robertson with no warning in front of 200 people. Caroline Wise will now be the oracle of the goddess Brigid. And I had to do it. They're all standing there staring at me in this sacred temple. And I did it. But the adrenaline was so high. My fear became an awesome experience, because that's what adrenaline does. But I think adrenaline has got a lot to do with magic, but I'm digressing. But yeah, once people have done it, and you can tell if someone's faking it, and we don't really get that. But yeah, it's a revelation for them. You have to, if you want a result magically or out in the landscape or psychic questing, you have to obey the rules of the local mythology or the local folklore characters. You just don't go in and impose your own spiritual system on it, or your own religious system on it. You work with the spirits of the land on all the levels.
Yes, exactly that.
Up to and including historical people that may be hanging around in the atmosphere.
Which of course they do. Right? It's like, yeah, of course that. But I think you probably answered my question that I was going to ask next, which is about why is this important today? I think you've partially, or maybe you've answered that, but I just wondered if you had anything to add to that idea.
Well, first of all, the goddesses are relevant today because they're not something that comes from the past. They're something that is always there. So they're not stuck, fossilized in history. I mean, if you had a goddess of trees or a goddess of a poppy or whatever, that didn't stop. Just because people stopped acknowledging those goddesses and the temples to those goddesses fell to ruin or whatever. So they're still there. They're active forms. I'm sure they evolve just like every other form evolves. And there does seem to be a great need in many people to reconnect to the divine feminine, as it's called, or these forces in a sort of feminine mask. That if the need wasn't there, people wouldn't be doing it, and there wouldn't be such a huge popularity of some of the new spiritualities like Wicca. So, but on a deeper level, and it sounds almost like a cliche, but it's terrifying because it's real, is I don't know the big answer because it's mysterious. But I think the pull of the deep past, the humans, our ancestors, go all the way back to the first humans and to beyond to the proto-humans and so on. So we're literally physically linked to them in an unbroken chain. So they are physically and genetically in us. from all over the world. And so we have this direct link to prehistory, almost at a cellular level, I would think. And our flesh is their flesh. And I think that what I said about the hurricane, I think perhaps we also carry their memories and instincts that can be awakened when certain things happen. And it's completely natural that we would feel the pull of that past. But as I said, what's really probably why is it important today? Humans are destroying our planet and draining its resources on a scale that's never ever happened before, and it's happening very, very quickly. And we're destroying not just our home, but the home of all the other creatures and plants and the oceans and the landscapes. We're taking it all down with us. And I don't know how you stop that. And because we won't stop it as is evident to see. So, we'll build over everything, poison everything, pollute everything, take up habitat of everything. All those things, of course, would have had their own deities and forces and spirits and elementals and so on in the past that were acknowledged. And of course, they're still there now. So it does sound a bit of a cliche to say that we have to look back to the deep past to secure the future, and that perhaps there is an instinct that a feminine force, if we clothe it in a feminine force, that somehow that is perhaps better than a lot of the patriarchal stuff we've seen. And I'm sorry if that does sound like a cliche, but I'm just trying to answer your question. I mean, we should be relating back and then putting into practice. We should be bringing back the world without plastic and the world without vast scale destruction of the forests and without needing to build on every inch of land. We should be reaching back to a time without capitalism and without pollution and bringing it forward into now and the future. So we can't do that as individuals, but I think a lot of us feel it. But what we can do, and it's maybe a balm for the soul, is reaching back to these forces, which with me takes the form of goddesses, as artists like yourself, as musicians, as writers, by other creative means. At least it is good for the soul. And I know, we're genetically linked to the women and men who lived when the goddesses who eventually emerged from the initial animistic beliefs were acknowledged. I mean, we all have an ancestor who would have acknowledged a goddess. So it's a deep communion. And this comes back to something we were talking about at the beginning and with your Jungian stuff as well, that we've separated ourselves from nature as humans. We see ourselves as superior to animals and certainly superior to plants and soil and trees and nature generally. So I think the animist impulse disappeared with what we think of civilization, and nature mysticism seems to be the key to getting back to it if you're lucky enough to have those experiences. But I don't see why we can't have unity. I don't see why we can't have a nice, modern, relevant 21st century world and bring back all of that.
I think that's right.
It's connection, isn't it? Connecting to something,
it is.
Not being rootless.
No, exactly that.
And they're more likely to look after it.
Right. Well, we need to, because that's all we have.
Yeah.
And it's also this rebalancing of, I would say this, the anima and the animus, the male and female side of the energies of the self. And actually, patriarchy crept in and took over and destroyed because, some male energies and this or the other can be quite destructive if they're not balanced against something else that's creative. So, it is a magical system, even in some psychological processes, which the psychological world don't like talking about it, right? They don't want to talk about that, but actually it's true. And, I do find that magical processes are about bringing balance, and it can be quite destructive to bring the balance. I think there's a lot of crazy energetic stuff that is occurring and whipping around, but actually it is a chance to reformat, re-kickstart what we're meant to be doing. And horrific as it may be, and I know plenty of people would argue against me, is that maybe it needs to be done in some sense. Anyway, I would say that.
Well, I don't know how to do it, but I can. I think we can do it. Go a little way towards the sense of it all by what I do with like working with clay, creating shrines and talismans that give us a meaningful and direct magical connection to the past, because these items are totemic themselves for the present and future as well. And as humans, however animist our sensibilities might be, we do sometimes need an object to focus on, a physical object, because we live in a physical world.
Yes, we do. Actually, it's a golden opportunity, Caroline, to talk about your course that's coming up in Oxford in October. Okay, would you like to say something about that? Because I think that people are listening to this may be super interested in what's coming up in the autumn.
Well, what we're going to be doing is, I mentioned earlier I had dyspraxia. And dyspraxia means I can't do art. And the one thing I wanted to be in life from childhood was an artist. And I realized that by working with clay, and for me, with some sort of spiritual input, which is the prehistoric goddesses, we can make shapes. We can all do that art. So it doesn't matter whether you're brilliant at art, mediocre at art, or like me, you can't do it, or you think you can't do it, or you've always been told you can't do it. It's quite liberating, if you're the latter, to actually find you can make something meaningful. We'll be looking at the shapes and the shapes of the deep prehistoric goddesses that go all the way back to like 40,000 BC, go back all the way to the end of to the Ice Age. And so we'll be making something meaningful, things you can take away, and other bits and magical bits and pieces. And we'll also be looking at oracular work, which I mentioned earlier, so people would be able to try that if they wanted to, in a completely safe environment, and where they've got support and so on. And we'll be looking at shrines and how you can have a shrine as a focal point for your goddess in your house or your workplace. And we'll be looking at how these can be hidden in plain sight for those people who perhaps have landlords or bosses or colleagues who would not understand and maybe wouldn't approve, flatmates or so on. So we'll be looking at that, and we're looking also at how you can make them more elaborate and how you can change them throughout the year. Yeah, and hopefully bringing it all together with a ceremony that is meaningful for everybody taking part. Wow. Where they all get to say their own words if they want to. I don't want people to feel pressured to speak if they're not used to it, but to make their own invocations or to their own petitions or whatever, so that people get to have a voice of the goddess.
And we really are going to bring the goddess into the 21st century. I think this is a wonderful idea, Caroline, and I'll be there. I'll be most interested. It will be Oxford. It will be in October, the 12th and 13th. If you need any more details on that, please email us at info@houseofzophiel.com, or connect to Caroline, or just contact me if you know me anyway, and I can give you some more information about it. It's been wonderful, Caroline, to talk to you. You've said so much. My head is so full now. I'm going to have to think about all that. So thank you very, very much.
You'll become oracular.
Yeah. That
Well,
was
thank you for having me. And I don't. The questions are quite big, but I hope I've been able to answer them at least from personal experience point of
I,
view.
I think you have. I think you've been very, very clear, and that is great. And I'm just hoping our listeners will appreciate. Well, I do know they'll please appreciate it. So let's see if this stimulates more interest in the goddess, and we're there for you. So I'm just going to say thank you again,
Thank you.
and I will talk to you soon, Caroline. But from the bottom of my heart, take well, go well, take care, and I'll be in touch with you soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.